Hope he gets better soon. Representative Vice Chair is going to be a little bit late. He's got to seek authorization or sponsorship for a bill in another committee. Everybody should have a chocolate on their desk. I do love you all, but that's not the reason it's there. It's punishment for my phone going off the other day. Some of you might have caught that, so I paid my penitence. We're going to start with anyone who wants to ask for sponsorship of a bill. Seeing no one, we're going to go on into our real work of the day, and today we're going to be, excuse me? Okay. Before we do that, we're going to have an introduction of a guest by Representative Nate.
I just took the opportunity, thank you, Mr. Chair, is to recognize 4 students from the Flint Hills Leadership Program out of Manhattan area. These are most, I think, for Junction City area or Fort Riley. And so we just want to welcome them here to our committee. They'll be here for about 30 minutes and they're going to head back out. They've been here with us all day. And then my intern that will be with us this year, Asher, he's from Junction City as well. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and welcome to committee. I hope it's informative. I do expect today to be very informative and interesting. We have 2 very knowledgeable people going to address us. And I think we'll start with the Kansas Sentencing Commissioner, Kansas Sentencing Commission Director, Mr. Schultz, Scott Schultz. Welcome to committee.
Make sure this is on. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Pleasure to be here with you. I'm sure that Representative Carmichael probably wasn't sick because of me, but I think he's probably sick of me sometimes. I've been with the Executive Director with the Sentencing Commission for 13 years. Plus, this is my 13th session last year. When I heard that Representative Carmichael was actually seeking another term, I had to stay. So, so this is my 14th. Pleasure to be able to talk with you. I have a lot of information today, and I am not going to you have the presentation with you, and I'm going to kind of skip through a few of them, but I want to hit on a few things, specifically what the commission does, certainly, because I know there's quite a few of you that are new this year, and then talk about what you're going to be getting from the Sentencing Commission during the course of this session and how to use that. And so you will be seeing most of the bills that you hear will actually have bed impact statements, and so we'll be going through that, and that is what our office actually provides. Some of the other things we're going to go through is Secretary Zamuda shared with you the prison bed space issue. We do projections on that, and he kind of showed you a few graphs that we had, I think, on Tuesday, and I'll go into more depth on that. And then I'll want to talk about some of the main things that we have in terms of resources for you. I've already expressed this to a couple of members of the committee, and I'll probably do it several more times during my presentation, but we have, in terms of criminal justice, we have the data. And so if there is a certain bill, if there is a certain thing that you're thinking about introducing, please contact us, and we will be able to assist you in just general data as far as felonies are concerned. So with that, I don't know what we have as far as, have you got clicker functioning, or are we? That is not my presentation. Okay. Well, there should be. Well, he is trying to cue that up. Again, I just want to give you a little history of the Sentencing Commission. The legislature, actually, it's a relatively new commission. started authorized by the legislature in 1989. And at that time, they wanted to get together folks to be able to look at what we potentially could do. Prison population was out of control. There was a lawsuit that had actually been filed. And at that particular time, 100 inmates were actually to be released, I think on a weekly basis, until the population got under control. And so the legislature started looking for ways to do something different than what they were doing. Those of you that are as old or older than me, pre-1993, would probably remember the indeterminate sentencing scheme where somebody's sentence would get 5 to 15 years or 15 to life or something of that nature. That's an indeterminate sentencing scheme that's very difficult to track because a lot of the offenders would do sometimes half as much of time. So the Sentencing Commission at that time that was formed in its infancy were looking for other things, and at that time there were other sentencing commissions out there in the country, namely Oregon, Washington, and Minnesota, that had some pretty good ideas, and they had actually put in some guidelines to actually follow. And so in 1993, the Sentencing Guidelines Act was actually passed in Kansas. At that particular time, there were 2 grids that were actually done. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in the scope of things. But the commission is made up of 17 members. And Secretary Zamuda, who you heard from on Tuesday, is one of those individuals. Prisoner Review Board Chair, Attorney General's Office. We have a lot of prosecutors, defense attorneys, and we have 4 legislators that are on the committee, as well as 3 judges, 1 appellate judge, and then our 2 district court judges are our chair and vice chair. They work through a lot of things as far as vetting potential policy situations to bring to you, but we also do data analysis. And so I have a research team that works on a lot of different things, but we actually receive all of the felony sentencing data that occurs in the state. And as a result of that, we have a fairly sizable database that is available. These slides just kind of give you an idea of some of the other things that the commission actually does. I've already talked about the legislative support. We are a very small state agency as part of the executive branch, but we provide a lot of support during the legislative activities and during the session. That is essentially a thing that essentially takes up about half of our staff is working on legislative actions at any given time during the session. As I indicated, we are the State Statistical Analysis Center for the state. We receive KBI data, arrest data, we receive KDOC data, and then we actually maintain our own felony sentencing data. To be able to do that requires a lot of data storage and everything else, in which we do and have been doing for quite some time. This allows us to be able to give you the prison bed space impacts that I talked about, and we'll go into further detail soon, and it gives you more information on what bills potentially will, what effect they could have. So we also have a annual report that we put out. Many people are very interested in how many felony sentences do we have, what are the top 5, what are the top 10, what about my jurisdiction? I have we have an exciting dashboard that we just put in over the summer, and if we have time to be able to cover that, I think, do we have internet access here that I could actually use on the presentation? If we do, be queuing that up. I do have I have linked all of those in the presentation so that if you go back to the presentation and after I show you what it can do, it's pretty cool, that you could actually click on there and go and check for your jurisdiction as to different years of crime, what that crime is, and give you a little bit better idea of what's going on in your own communities as far as felony sentencing is concerned. We have a lot of, I've spent a lot of time in the last several years creating educational outreach, and so we do a lot of training for judges, probation officers, as well as lawyers that are involved in the criminal justice space. In fact, we were just doing one over the lunch hour, continuing legal education for staff and for all the attorneys in the state that are actually interested in sentencing law. So very proud of that. We also have a staff attorney that fields questions as far as we kind of call it a Q&A helpline. And it's very important for us to be able to assist the legal community because then it makes their job easier, certainly. And so if we can do that, our job is, we're doing our job. We also maintain 3 sentencing forms that all practitioners use: the pre-sentence investigation report, the journal entry of sentencing, as well as the probation violation journal entry of sentencing. These are all updated on an annual basis and rolled out to every July 1st to practitioners so that in every felony incidents, that's what's being used. And they're changed because of what you do during the session, as well as any appellate cases that may have implications for change. So I've touched on the history a little bit. Like I said, we have 17 members, and that is it's a great cross-section of individuals because it actually, usually most of those folks are kind of tip of the spear in criminal justice, and so we can vet a lot of issues through them during the time that we are together. We meet monthly. We also have subcommittees that, about 6 of them, that are meeting on different issues at any given time, and so we're pretty active in doing so. So I talked about the guidelines. We have 2 guidelines. You have that with you on your table, and thank you for handing those out. One is a non-drug and one is a drug grid. These have been in place since the origin in 1993. They are laminated, so if anything, they make a really great placemat, or you could put your coffee on it or something like that. But I would encourage you to bring this with you to every committee meeting. These are going to be very important because we're talking about severity levels, and that's something that you need to be aware of in terms of how increases in penalties are going to look, or decreases in penalties depending on the circumstances. But I kind of wanted to just briefly kind of go over some of the dynamics or the fundamentals of the grid, so you can kind of, if you're not practicing in this area, it might be difficult to try and look at it and think you understand, but maybe not. So if we look at the non-drug grid, what you see on the x-axis is criminal history, A through I. And that goes all the way from 3+ person felonies to a misdemeanor with no record, which is an I category. The sentencing in Kansas is based upon the severity level of the offense and your criminal history. So you are treated more harshly, as logic or common sense would tell us, if you've done this before. And so we have, depending on when you see those numbers in the boxes, those are months that would be required to be served when the judge sentences you. On the y-axis is the severity levels, the Roman numerals. Those are based upon 1 being the most severe, down to 10 being the least severe. Now, what are these colors on here? The colors are designated by the legend that you can see down at the bottom right-hand corner. The green represents presumptive probation. So if I'm, for example, I've committed a level 8 offense and I have a F criminal history, for example, I just follow it down. That's 11 to 13 months, and I'm in a presumptive probation range. So outside of anything in particular that might be different, I can be assured that I'm going to get 17 to 19 months, and I'm in the presumptive probation range for the court to sentence me to. A lot of these things were done just simply because there was a lot of confusion with the system prior to actually having a grid system. The grid system allows for victims to better know what their defendant is actually looking at as far as time. It also helps attorneys in the process to actually know just exactly what the defendant is looking at. And of course, it helps the defendant understand what they're up against as well, rather than just a 15 to life type of potential for sentence. There are two other categories on that legend that you can see. The blue doesn't occupy too many spaces on the grid. Those are what are called presumptive imprisonment boxes or border boxes. If you fall into one of those, based upon your criminal history and the severity level, you will actually, the court has an opportunity to either send you to prison or send you to probation. What I will tell you as far as data is concerned, about 70% of those individuals falling into those boxes are given probation. Now, all the white space above that is all presumptive prison. So unless something happens and the parties make an agreement and the judge agrees to it with a departure, that individual then can expect to be committed to the Department of Corrections. On the backside, you've got the drug offenses. A special drug grid was actually done for that. Now, keep in mind, again, as I said, these are for felonies only. And so that you are aware, you've heard of felony and misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are the lesser of the two. Misdemeanors, you can serve jail time up to a year in the county jail. Everything else after that that's more severe are felony crimes. So, and I want to distinguish between county jail and state prison as well, because a lot of times you'll see incarceration, and sometimes that needs to be clarified. Misdemeanors are only served in jail, in county jails, and the state prisons are the prison sanctions that they have to go off and serve in the facilities that Secretary Zamuda is in charge of. So just a little bit, some of you obviously know that, but I wanted to kind of be able to provide that as just kind of a fundamental exercise. On the back, you have a drug grid. It's smaller. We only have 5 levels. 1 through 4 of those has to do with manufacture and distribution. So if you can keep that in mind when you're looking at this, level 5s are all possessions, the least of the drug crimes. So you can see there are more green spaces, there are more blue spaces, and there are more white spaces for the court to actually consider that. I will say on the backside as well, you can see that there are also probation terms. So when individuals, depending on their severity level of conviction, they actually get different times of probation. So keep in mind that, you know, lesser felonies are going to serve 12 months. Higher felonies, 24 months. Highest felonies, 36 months, most on the grid at least anyway. Back to the drug grid, we do provide how you get to 1 through 4 and 5 is based upon quantity. Back in 2012, the legislature changed it to a quantity-based system. So those get the bottom, I'll have to forward this. The bottom table actually gives you what those thresholds are. So when prosecutors want to charge something, they know exactly what level they're going to be able to charge based upon the quantity of the substance. So depending on the type of drug, you can kind of see there fentanyl, meth, and heroin are placed together. Cocaine and marijuana are different as far as their quantities are concerned. Changes have been made in this space the last couple of years with regard to fentanyl. Director Mativi is partially responsible for that push because of the dangers of that drug, and rightly so. So that kind of gives you an idea of what potentially to expect when you're looking at the levels of what is currently in place as far as current law is concerned. So, for example, just to kind of give you a well, let's say that there's a small meth sale, for example. In this case, it'd be a level 4, less than the gram. This paper clip is about a gram. So I'm caught with this much meth. I'm looking at a level 4 offense, and on that, it depends on my criminal history. If I don't have any offense, any priors at all, I'm looking at 14 to 16 months because it's a level 4. And I'm potentially in a border box, which likely I get probation if I don't have any other priors that I need to deal with. So those are the type of things that I potentially, depending on the circumstances, I could be eligible for Senate Bill 123 substance abuse treatment. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But we administer a program of substance abuse treatment that is paid, state-paid treatment for individuals that get caught up in possession, small sales, and now even lower non-person, non-drug offenses that allows the state to pay for that treatment while they're on probation. So some of that, obviously, you can argue that it's a public health versus public safety issue, and I think in different terms you certainly can. The big question on the guidelines is, why do we have these? What's the point? Well, not only, as I told you, is it easier for practitioners to be able to move that defendant through the system and let everybody be notified, but it also establishes equality between, or equity among offenders in typical cases. Two of the main issues with not having guidelines before was disparity in sentencing as it pertained to geography, as it pertained to race. And so an individual here in Shawnee County who had a burglary may get treated differently than somebody out in Cheyenne County. Many times that you may have, my example, of course, is I work at the Shawnee County DA's office, and we would typically on Thursdays we'd have a stack of burglaries that would be on the docket. Well, in Cheyenne County, you may have a burglary once every blue moon. And so part of the guidelines then were there to bring that disparity to a point where you could actually, no matter where you are in the state, no matter the color of your skin, you would be able to actually get the same box, same sentence or punishment that the other individuals would be getting and not. Now, the guidelines do allow for discretion in atypical cases. There are departures that actually can occur, and that does happen routinely when either the parties agree to or the judge actually departs. For our purposes in my office, it allows, that last point that I have on the slide, it allows for more certainty in predicting prison populations. And that is a boon for all involved. Because that helps the secretary, that helps the governor, that helps the legislature be able to estimate or predict what potentially is coming as far as capacity in the facilities. One of the exciting things that we've also done, in addition to the dashboards that I talked about, we have rolled out as of October 1st a soft launch of the Kansas Sentencing app. These forms, the 3 forms that I talked to you about, have been hard copies forever. And we decided to finally come into the 21st century and develop an application that is now being used by over 1,200 users. And we have probably over 700 cases now in the application, and it provides an electronic way to actually move these through the system. And we're very excited about that, have done many, many trainings on it. So as it pertains to I talked about the bed space impacts a little bit. Part of this is understanding what you will actually be receiving from our office. And it is a document that has 5 parts, 4 to 5 parts, depending on the circumstances. And that includes these particular items that you can see. The box is probably the most important for you. We know that you are busy, you have more things to do than time, and that so we've developed the box to give you a one-stop shop. Here it is, look at the page and be done with it. If you want to go deeper into the data, as far as the findings section and the other sections that are here, we provide that information. But the box is the main thing if you want to look at a quick look situation. On the left, this pretty much gives you an idea of what that document looks like. Sometimes it's a page, sometimes it's 7 pages, depending on the complexity of the bill. But that gives you an idea of what you're going to see here as far as what is the effect on prison admissions, what is the effect on prison beds. And we divide those because you can have admissions, more admissions than you have beds, depending on the length of sentence. And so the whole prison system is based upon admissions and length of sentence when we look at projections. And so those two main categories are something that we look at, and they affect how the populations move in the facilities. So as I was saying, we're not associated with the Department of Corrections. We're a freestanding agency, but our value that we provide is the data. And that's great because that allows us to be free from any bias or anything like that. The data is what the data is. So to give you an idea of if you dig farther, these are some of the other findings that you would actually see in terms of us being able to tell you how many offenders are in the previous year were actually sentenced or admitted to prison. Other issues as far as program credits. We actually include KBI arrest data that we receive every year from Tony's group that allow for, to give you an idea of how many folks were arrested versus how many people were sentenced. So a whole dearth of information here for you. What I will tell you is this impact is not going to be definitive for you. Not going to claim that, but it is another piece of the puzzle for you in figuring out whether or not you're going to support the legislation or amend it. So it just gives you that much more information to make those decisions. And we hope that it's in a format that you can take in fairly easily. One of the last things that we actually do, we don't want you to see this bill in a vacuum. So when you look at it, we also at the back of the document, we have a proportionality comparison. So for example, the example I have here is highlighted as a Kansas Offender Registration Act, and it's a level 3, for example. So if you look on your grid, you can see level 3. That's pretty high. You may think that there may be Representative Resman may have a defective muffler bill that he brings up, and he wants it to be a level 3 as well. Now he wouldn't do that, but part of the proportionality comparison is to allow you to look at, see what other severity levels are we talking about here. So is a defective muffler the same as a kidnapping that's at a level 3? So again, giving you more information, decide, well, maybe we need to dial that down a little bit. Or in some cases, we've had instances where balloons have been put in when you work the bill, and we've increased the penalties on a bill. So keep that in mind that, again, we have all this information available for you to be able to consider. How are we doing on time? One of the other things that we do every July in the summer is prison population projections for DOC. The Secretary talked about this a little bit. I appreciate the kind words based upon the projections that we do. I want to expand on that a little bit to talk to you about what we do when it comes to prison projections. We take their data and are able to actually, we have a computer model that we've been using since 1995 that has been extremely accurate. What does it do? It's a 10-year projection model that allows us to estimate prison population based upon the data that we have. In doing so, that gives us, it gives the Department of Corrections, it gives you, it gives the governor's office a little idea of what's down the road, what's coming up. And so we have normal data, like I'm going to kind of go through here as far as here is a 10-year look back, essentially, of prison population. At the end of last year, we were at 9,404. Obviously, you can see 2020, 2021, if there was any bright spots for COVID, prison population was probably about the only one. But it was, and you can see the decline in the population. There were a myriad of factors there that actually caused that. I think one of the questions had come up as to why that was. I can't tell you definitively. There was not one thing that actually caused that. There were certainly issues of the courts were closed. A lot of the individuals that were in jail for pretty serious crimes were actually held, and they weren't having jury trials, if you recall. And so most of those folks with serious offenses were going to probably have jury trials. On the probation situation, a lot of those weren't reporting. So consequently, probably not as many revocations as you would have because nobody was coming in to report in the probation offices. So it could have been that, plus quite a few other things. I don't quite think that people stopped committing crimes during that time, but it's a myriad of things. It certainly was not DOC letting people out early, because that was not the case. Interesting data, but as you can see, we have raged back with a vengeance to a point where we are now looking at some dire straits type of situations. I talked about the admissions before as far as it being a factor. This is one of the tables that we track in terms of admissions and releases. It just makes sense. If you have more admissions than you have releases from the facilities, you're gonna continue to have more people in prison. Longer sentences will cause that. There's a stacking effect that actually occurs as time goes on, and as the Secretary told you, there are folks that do about a year, there are folks that do about 2 years, and then there's other folks that are doing quite a bit longer time. Now, the Commission is set up so that our job is to be the gatekeepers of the guidelines. That's what I kind of tell people. And by doing that, we're able to monitor what's happening within the guidelines, whether they're being followed as far as conformity is concerned, and then make recommendations as a result of what we're seeing. The next slide is talking about direct commitments. That basically means you're in court, defendant gets sentenced, judge says you're going to prison. You're directly committed at that particular time. We've seen obviously a decline during COVID. It's spiked back up. It went down a little bit this last year, but again, still moving in an upward trajectory. We track probation condition violators. Now keep in mind that 3/4 of the individuals that go on probation are successful. And I think even the Secretary mentioned that. That is a hallmark of probation in Kansas, that those officers do a fantastic job in aiding those offenders to not be coming back through that revolving door. This kind of gives you an idea as far as trends are concerned. Thankfully, that the revocations have not come back up as much as those direct commitments are concerned. On the back side of if you actually are committed to prison, you will have a term of parole if you're on the guidelines. And so, or post-release supervision is what it's called sometimes. And these are the individuals in the next slide. And again, those as well. And those offender numbers have actually been coming up as well. And so that's when you're on post-release or parole, you obviously are being supervised by individuals from KDOC. If you violate, you can actually be placed back into the prison system. This next slide is just simply put all those three together so that you can have those together. This final slide is kind of gives you an idea of specifically what we do. This is the bread and butter of the projections. I placed this in red at the bottom there, the 2,667, because I want to emphasize this. We are looking at capacity with male and female population within the next few years. And despite what has been done in the recent past, if we continue on the same trajectory that we have, we're going to have issues. Issues to the point of, even if you accept Secretary Zamuta's request to revamp Hutch, and there are additional beds, I think like 414 added there, we will still need almost 1,000 beds by the end of the 10-year time period. That's another prison. So it is incumbent upon, I would submit that it is incumbent upon the legislature to be mindful of this type of situation, that we are not seeing any stop as far as the population is concerned. We see blips seasonally in which, like the last month, the last 2 months that we've seen things flatten out. But ordinarily, and this was true pre-COVID as well, we're on a trajectory to continue to see more people placed in prison. Now, that doesn't mean that the really serious offenders shouldn't be placed in prison. I don't think there's any question about that. We need to actually remove some of those individuals from society. It's some of the other individuals that you could potentially look at as to either decreasing sentences or incentivizing them with credit, either program credit, good time credit, those type of things that they actually receive, either expanding that particular situation or doing a myriad of other alternatives to be able to incentivize those individuals to program credit, for example, to get more education and give credit for that. Vocational training that is already provided. Other things that you would actually give credit or incentivize those offenders, which then would actually allow for them to actually get out earlier and be released with the idea that they were going to be productive, which is, of course, what we all want. So again, I had red flag warning on at the beginning of this section slide. I will continue to waive that. In terms of we need to be looking at, and I hope you will consider that when you're discerning each of these bills as to we are headed to that point. That is a result of increased penalties. It's certainly a result of the individuals committing the crimes, no doubt about it. But it certainly is something that we need to think about in terms of, what are we going to do with these individuals? Do we want to spend $40,000 or do we want to spend less and have them in a community supervised setting, which has been proven by research to actually work better than having them incarcerated? Not everybody. I'm not going to make a blanket assertion there at all. But some of those individuals could be on community supervision that may be in prison at this point. The next few slides just kind of give you an idea of where we were at, where we're going. I think Secretary Zamuta may have shown you some of these slides as well. Just to give you an idea, our total population right now is 9,576 as of yesterday. Capacity is 10,674. We divide up male and female populations. And so you've already seen these in terms of, we track those. The female population is obviously such a smaller percentage of the total prison population, somewhere in the 10% range or so. And so when their numbers move, they move at a greater percentage, obviously. We track, as any good agency would do, we track those projected numbers that we make to what the actual numbers are. Normally, you know, in your election cycles, you look at plus or minus 5% error rate type thing. I get my folks down to 2%. So that we really can make sure that we are giving as good a numbers as we possibly can. And what you'll see here is that for the most part, we were able to accomplish that on a monthly basis in terms of showing that the model itself is working very, very well in tracking. We're under 2% most of the time. We finished the year at 0.2% accuracy. For that size or that frequency of population, it's outstanding, and that's certainly a credit to my research folks. We also track. We've also tracked up to this year time point. We are still looking at that overall as very positive as far as what that model that I just showed you is tracking. We're tracking fairly well next to what that said. This gives you a little bit better idea graphically. We've jumped down, like I said, a couple months, but that is presumed that that's probably going to go back up. Again, it gives you male and female population for this particular fiscal year, and we can go into the annual report quickly. Our annual report, again, has changed. We now have a dashboard. And again, as I said before, really excited about that because it allows you to slice and dice. I can go to Osage and see exactly what, in 2023, the sentences, the whole breakdown. I can do the same thing in Finney County, Shawnee County. I can do actually an entire group of judicial district if I wanted to. If I wanted to see how Southwest Kansas is doing, I can compare them to Northeast Kansas. And so it allows for a lot of great comparison. And like I said, I would encourage you to do that on your own jurisdiction to see the size and scope of felony sentencing in your jurisdiction. But these are kind of some of the things that you can actually, we actually present in terms of top 5 offenses. This is statewide. As you can see, the leader. Now, keep in mind, the other is basically everything other than what's being listed there. But the leader by far is drugs. That is as driving the bus here. For some jurisdictions, it's less than others, but that's kind of the main situation. We track demographics as well, race and gender distribution. This is always a situation in which, as well as ethnicity and age distribution, this is always a situation where African Americans are disproportionately represented in probation as well as in the prison context based upon what their percentage in the general population for Kansans is. Just so that you can, and I want to give Tony plenty of time here, this gives you a little bit more idea of the breakdown of prison sentences. The males, 86%, as far as the admissions are concerned. So a little bit, when I started this job, it was about 92%. So females have actually made up a greater percentage of that at this point. White offenders accounted for 68.1% of the prison population. Probation sentences, about 60% of all those felonies get sentenced to probation. So just kind of give you an idea of everybody in felony situations, about 6 in 10 of those receive probation. That gives you a breakdown of we have, again, the drug and non-drug sentences. That gives you a better idea of the cross-section, which is, you know, there's those sentences for non-drug sentences are more than what drug sentences actually receive. Top 10 for probation non-drug sentences. I'll let you look at that. That gives you an idea of there are person as well as non-person felonies. Person felonies are normally designated as such because of the nature of the offense, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, you're using a weapon, those type of things that you would generally think would potentially be needed to be a person felony versus theft, some burglaries are non-person crimes. So just so that you can, again, distinguishing those two as well. Our probation drug sentences, about 82% of those are possession offenses. Everything else would be a distribution. There are also DUI sentences that previously are, you can kind of see there a makeup of, Johnson County is always disproportionately represented. There are a lot of crossover with the state, with Missouri, so that they actually, DUI is, I think, third or fourth on their top 5 every year of felony DUI for their top crimes. Just to kind of give you an idea, the big 4 counties, Sedgwick, Johnson, Shawnee, and Wyandotte, make up about 50%. You know, Sedgwick County has about 1 of every 4 felony crimes in the state. And so that has changed over time. And in fact, the rural jurisdictions are actually increasing in crime rate. And some of that anecdotally you could probably see. I want to talk just a little bit again about the dashboards. If I haven't already, please, the link is there, please use it. This is the type of information that you're going to actually see. If the chair wants to look, I actually screenshotted Finney County right over there on the right. In comparison with the rest of the state, you can actually make those comparisons to say, how do I compare to the other, the rest of the entire state? How do I compare to Douglas County? How do I compare? So it's a wonderful tool. You can even export the information as well, so I would encourage you to do that. Or again, contact our office and we're happy to do it for you. One of the major programs that we have, in addition to our operations that I talked about already, is the Senate Bill 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Program. And that actually allows for state-paid treatment. We administer that program to the tune of about $10 million. And it covers possession offenders that if you fall into a criteria, or you have small sales, because we found out that small sales folks are actually selling to support their habit, you're potentially eligible. If you have level 7 to 10 non-drug offenses, you could potentially also be eligible, and that's SB 123 plus. So that covers the gambit. The RAFT is Recovery from Addiction-Funded Treatment. It's a diversion program that prosecutors can actually utilize to actually divert folks from the system and actually have it during their diversion, which is usually 12 months. We'll actually pay for that as well. And that was done in 2021. A lot of bipartisan support for that, and it's actually been a good program for those folks. This kind of gives you a little bit of data on, again, the mission is to keep these folks from coming back. We know that substance abuse and mental health comprise a majority of some of the things that are kind of wrong with folks that are in the criminal justice system, that are in prison. Sometimes they have both. A lot of times, if you have mental health issues, you want to medicate, and you need to use substances to do that. And so you end up having some of these issues. Then you have to get money to actually support your habit, and then we fall into the issue of becoming in contact with law enforcement. Now you're in the process. So this allows the program allows for mandatory treatment that the court has to order the individual into probation for up to 18 months of treatment. And they still can fail, and they do, but a lot of them are very successful and then don't reoffend. In fact, folks that actually, we did a study with the University of Cincinnati several years ago to actually determine, again, performance of the program. If you complete the SB 123 program, you are 75% less likely to reoffend. That's pretty darn good. So the program is doing very well, and of course, the individuals that are participating in this usually, or if not all the time, are indigent. And so they couldn't afford substance abuse treatment anyway. So in doing this, this allows for, and this goes over the demographics of who actually we're treating. We actually act as the administrator for this. We have a vendor that is we contract with that actually does the payments to treatment providers. But we have 120 treatment providers in each one of your communities that actually participates. The judge, if the court orders treatment, they actually are a certified treatment provider through our office. They provide treatment, they invoice us, we pay the invoice. That's pretty much how it works. And then we track who's participating. The diversion programs, we have the top 6 are here that you can see: Wyandotte, Reno, Lyon, Dickinson, Johnson, Cherokee Coffee, and Crawford. And we track those as well. We spend somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4,200 per offender for this program. You can balance that between $40,000 in prison and community treatment. It's a pretty good deal. The study that I was talking about, the UC study, also talked about cost benefit for it as well. And every dollar that is spent on this program saves us as taxpayers $4. So we're very proud of being able to administer this. You can kind of see as of right now, meth is the main driver of all of the drug crimes, for that matter. But we are seeing, obviously, opiates in the come on strong, replaced marijuana, as to what we're doing, the spending by diagnosis, but also what's happening generally as far as general sentencing is concerned. We kind of act as a insurance company almost, because we actually pay everything from inpatient treatment all the way to outpatient treatment. And so we set cost caps, length of stays, and that type of thing for those providers with the idea that we're hoping that these offenders are going to be successful in the treatment. I'm going to wrap up here by saying thank you again for your attention. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about sentencing guidelines, and hopefully it will help you. If you get stuck, I can help you get unstuck. So please call on me at any time, and we are happy to help you with anything involved in this committee. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Director. I think given the time, we're going to move on to Director Mativi, and we'll take questions at the end if we have time.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Welcome to committee, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome.
Chairman Lewis, Vice Chair Ressman, Ranking Member Schlingensiefman, committee members. Pleasure to be here and to try to inform you a little bit about our fight against fentanyl and issues of concern with criminal justice trends in Kansas. First, I'd like to welcome the new legislators. Congratulations to you. At the risk of boring some of the folks that have been around a while, I might do a quick primer on the KBI, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Just to explain a little bit about what we do. The KBI was created in 1939 when 2 private organizations approached the Kansas legislature and asked for help with the 2 most pressing criminal justice issues of the day. Those 2 organizations were the Kansas Bankers Association and the Kansas Livestock Association, because the 2 most pressing criminal justice issues of the day in 1939 were bank robberies and cattle theft. Right? So the KBI was created to be a statewide resource for law enforcement organizations trying to investigate more complicated, more significant crimes. Today, we exist for that very same purpose. We are here to be a resource for law enforcement organizations across the state. A lot of folks in the public have the misperception that we exist to police the police. And that's not correct. If they don't like the way that the county sheriff has run the burglary investigation or the murder investigation, we're not there to sort of swoop in and tell them they did something wrong, right? We are there to provide a resource. An interesting fact that I think most Kansans don't know is in Kansas today, we have about 425 law enforcement agencies. 105 counties, so there's one county that has a joint police and sheriff, right? But there's 104 sheriff's departments. The rest are police departments. Of those 425 law enforcement agencies, 70% have 10 or fewer officers. 70% have 10 or fewer officers. 50% have 5 or fewer. Whenever any one of those law enforcement agencies has a situation that exceeds their capabilities, they call us for help. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to say yes to every one of those requests. As a result, we have to prioritize what we do. And our priorities are violent crimes, crimes against children, public corruption, and the last category is complex criminal organizations, which in Kansas today means drugs. And as you heard from Scott, the greatest drug threat in Kansas today is fentanyl. But still, by far, the drug of choice is meth. We see more meth than we see anything else when it comes to drugs. But fentanyl is killing more people than any other drug, right? So, fun fact, Director Schultz and I were classmates at Washburn Law School. We started our legal careers together in the Shawnee County DA's office, prosecuting speeding tickets and misdemeanor crimes in 1993. So even in 1993, it was clear that he was going to be the big deal that he is today. So I just want to make it clear that even that long ago, we all knew that that was going to be the case.
I might interrupt, and they weren't sure about you?
Oh, no, no. No. Not even remotely, Mr. Chairman. Your invitation was to talk about the fight against fentanyl, and I welcome that opportunity. It still amazes me to this day that the number of fentanyl deaths that we're seeing in our country and in our state is not a front page headline every single day. It should be. Fentanyl is killing people. It is now, fentanyl overdose death is the leading cause of death of Americans under 40 in the United States. Think about that for a minute. The leading cause of death of Americans under 40, more than car accidents, more than gun violence, more than suicide, the leading cause of death. And in particular, our kids, our most vulnerable population, is bearing the brunt of this epidemic. That's why it's so important to us. That's why for the last 2 legislative sessions, we have stood before you and asked for help. And I have to say that you have delivered. And we're very grateful for the help that the legislature has given us, and I'll talk a little bit today about how that has played out, what we've done with the additional funding that you've given us, and what results we're seeing. As a part of our 2024 budget, so 2 years ago, we asked for funding for what at the time we were calling the surge, which the theory was we were seeking increased funding to allow us to surge resources to particular issues. As things have evolved, we are surging those resources to fentanyl, right? But 2 years ago, we asked for additional funding for the surge, our fight against fentanyl, and you enhanced our budget by a little over $1.3 million. With that funding, we stood up what we call JFIT, the Joint Fentanyl Impact Team. And JFIT included, for the first time ever at the KBI, a canine program. The KBI had never had a canine program. And in January of 23, when I took this job, there was no law enforcement canine in Kansas that was capable of detecting pure fentanyl, just fentanyl, right? Drug dogs were capable of detecting marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. And sometimes we see fentanyl mixed in with those drugs. So we could find the fentanyl when it was mixed in with other drugs. But increasingly, we're seeing fentanyl trafficked by itself, just fentanyl pills or just fentanyl powder. And not having the ability to have a canine help us find those shipments, those packages, was like flying blind. So we stood up a canine program, trained our 4 dogs to detect fentanyl. Since then, there are many other canine programs in the state that are capable of detecting just fentanyl. But it's a tremendous resource for us, and that unit has been tremendously effective. The JFIT, when I started this job, I came after a career as a federal prosecutor, and in spite of that experience, I rejected the federal task force model. The federal task force model has always been state or locals, you provide a resource, an officer, a deputy, a trooper, you provide those to the federal task force, and then the federal task force would in turn, help you with your investigations. In my experience, it didn't really work out that way, right? For the state and locals, that ended up being a lost resource for the most part. So what we did is we partnered with the Highway Patrol. Colonel Smith has been a great friend and colleague since he started shortly after I did. And we created a true partnership between our 2 agencies. And almost immediately, Homeland Security Investigations joined us. And that was the core of JFIT. But rather than us sending people to the feds, we convinced HSI, you assign folks with us. And since then, the team has really grown, developed into the way I believe and have always felt a task force should really work. So we have now DEA, in addition to Homeland Security Investigations, and ATF. All 3 of those federal agencies have assigned folks to us. In addition, we have local departments joining as well. The local departments are seeing the benefits of assigning their officers to us, and then we help them work the more significant cases in their jurisdictions. And we're seeing tremendous success with this approach to the task force model across the state of Kansas. Building on that success, we came back last legislative session and we asked for what we called the fight against fentanyl. We asked for resources that would really help us make an impact in this fight, and you responded very generously, in my view. You approved an enhancement request of $6.9 million with 30 full-time equivalent positions. Now, we didn't just ask for agents. We also asked for the agency infrastructure that helps support those agents, right? We asked for crime analysts. We asked for IT support positions, scientists, a public affairs specialist to help us spread the word on social media about the dangers of fentanyl, and background investigators to help us get agents on board. In addition, we used part of that enhancement package for what we call our CPP, our Career Progression Plan. And that's the first success that I want to point out today. As a result, let me back up a step. KBI agents have the same statutory authority under Kansas law as a sheriff. As a result of that, when one of those agencies that I mentioned earlier picks up the phone and they ask for help, they don't expect a rookie police officer or a patrolman, right? They expect a very seasoned investigator. For that reason, the agents that we hire have a mandatory minimum of 5 years felony investigative experience. Our pay disparity over time had gotten to the point where we were really incapable of recruiting those experienced detectives because their departments were paying them more than we could offer them, right? So the CPP that you funded for us last year allowed us to implement almost across the board a 25% pay increase for our agents. That made us competitive again. In new agent classes since 2020, here have been our numbers. 2020, 7 agents. 21, 8 agents. 22, 4 agents. 23, 7 agents. 24, 12 agents. Last year, and I think it is in large part due to the CPP, 18 new agents. We were able to put 18 new agents on the streets in our communities this year, and I attribute much of that to the CPP. So I thank you very much for what you did for us last year with regard to increasing our ability to be able to recruit and retain those agents. We applied a similar increase, not quite as much. I think it was 12.5%-ish for scientists, and that has helped as well. Our battle with scientists is a little bit different. Our trouble there is not recruiting, but retaining. As soon as we have trained a scientist, they become much more valuable in the private sector than they are in the public sector. So with scientists, we have to hang on to them. With agents, we have to get them in the door. With scientists, we have to hang on to them. But the CPPs have been very, very helpful with that. With regard to what we're doing with that money, I mentioned to you that we're in the process of staffing up those 30 positions. We're not quite there yet. Recruiting is still a challenge, but I think we're well down the road of filling all of the positions that we were given. It's new enough that there's no data out there that really helps me correlate the increase of resources to what's happening on the street. Unfortunately, we're not yet seeing a decrease in the amount of fentanyl on the streets. We're not seeing a decrease in the number of fentanyl overdose deaths. We are having success, I think, this is mostly anecdotal, with changing the mindset. We have to help people understand that an overdose isn't an accident anymore. First of all, the vast majority, almost all of the overdose deaths that we're seeing right now are fentanyl. If you see an overdose death in Kansas today, you're almost guaranteed that it's a fentanyl death, okay? Those aren't accidents. Those deaths are resulting from somebody intentionally introducing fentanyl into the drug distribution chain, okay? One of the things I can tell you about fentanyl is that this is a cartel-supplied product. We are not seeing any fentanyl sold on the streets in Kansas that isn't provided by one of two major Mexican drug cartels. Now, and we're seeing it everywhere, right? We're seeing fentanyl sold mixed with other drugs. We're seeing it mixed with meth. We're seeing it mixed with crack. We're seeing it sprayed on marijuana. We're seeing it sold on its own in both pill and powder form. Now, people ask me, well, I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense. Why are the cartels killing their customers? That business model doesn't make sense. That's not the business model. The business model is you expose as many people as you possibly can to that high, and they will seek that high, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to introduce as many people as they can to this particular brand of high because it is so addictive and it results in such drug-seeking behavior that they create additional customers. And if they lose one or two of those customers along the way, they don't care because ultimately it increases their bottom line. The problem is those people that they're losing might be a 16-year-old football player from your community or a 14-year-old debate student from your community or a 13-year-old wrestler from your community. That doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is improving their profitability and their bottom line. So that's the fight that we're up against here. A success story that I'm going to tell you about is not long after I started. I was invited to a roundtable discussion that was hosted by Senator Marshall. And during that discussion, I met the father of a 15-year-old young man from Leavenworth County who had died of a fentanyl overdose. And that father was grief-stricken at having lost his 15-year-old son and frustrated by the fact that the person who sold his son that pill hadn't been caught. I was able to talk with that father, and here's where our role with law enforcement comes into such importance. The local department that had been investigating that 15-year-old's death hadn't called us for help. And as a result, the information that was available to them in the investigation, most of which is electronic, right, and most of which was on that young boy's phone, they were not able to exploit that data the way that we can exploit it. So through a cooperative relationship with that law enforcement organization, we were able to introduce ourselves into the investigation. We were able to get a hold of that data, exploit it, identify the dealer, and successfully prosecute him. That overdose death happened on January 18th of 2023. 2 weeks ago, an individual named Torrin Michael Bauman, who was identified as the dealer who sold Cruz Burris that pill, was sentenced to 155 months in prison for the crime of distributing a controlled substance causing death. Okay? So that is a great illustration of how, when we're able to get cooperation between law enforcement agencies, we're able to apply the resources that you have enhanced for us, right? When we're able to exploit the data that we know exists in these cases, it may take us a while, but we can find who did it, and we can, in conjunction with a bold prosecutor, we can hold them responsible. And that's what happened here. So I have to credit Todd Thompson. There's a lot of prosecutors in Kansas that are very nervous about taking these kinds of cases. They're difficult cases to prove. Todd took this case, he prosecuted it aggressively, and now, as a result, someone's being held accountable for Cruz Burris's death. And that is absolutely a success story. That's an illustration of how we're trying to fight this fight and why these resources are so incredibly important to our ability to do it. In your written testimony, I'm going to pivot a little bit now and away from fentanyl and just talk about crime trends in general. Bob Stewart, our executive officer who handles legislative affairs for us, who is the face of the KBI in this building, who you're going to see over here on a daily basis. Bob puts the written testimony together, does a really good job with it. He's got a lot of data in there that if you want to take it home and read it and unpack it, there's some fascinating information. I'm going to focus on two things. I'm going to focus on the general trend in numbers, number one, and then I'm going to focus, secondly, on those numbers as they relate to juveniles, because I know that's a matter of particular interest to this committee. But we're going to talk both about crimes committed against children and crimes committed by children. Okay, two very different areas of juvenile justice in my view. Trend-wise, so we're very early in 2025. The 2024 data isn't available yet. The most recent data we have to rely on is 2023. So as we continue processing those reports and that data becomes available, we'll have more recent data to use, but unfortunately the timing of the legislative session and the timing of the data compilation doesn't overlap very well, right? So we're talking about 2023. The violent crime rate in 2023 decreased a little bit as compared with 2022. The violent crime rate was down 4.3%. The caution that I would ask you to think about is that violent crime rate is still almost 10% above the 10-year average, right? We saw such a dramatic increase in the violent crime rate within the last few years. We have seen some mild decreases recently, but we are still above the 10-year trend line when it comes to violent crime. For property crime, those crimes have been declining for the past 6 years. In 2023, we saw a slight uptick in property crime, 2.6%. So we didn't have a big fluctuation in crime numbers in 2023, either violent crime or property crime. The needle didn't move a lot. My concern there, as you might imagine, is because we have to prioritize, and one of our priorities is the investigation of violent crimes, and especially violent crimes against children. Any increase in those numbers is concerning to us from a resource allocation perspective. Crimes against children. That's one of the areas of criminality that isn't well captured by statistics at the state level. Crimes against children include actual sexual and physical contact, online contact designed to entice the child or to sextort the child. Seeing more and more sextortion type of cases, primarily among adolescents, as they increase the use of their electronic devices and send each other things. and child pornography. There is a body called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. That's where we get a significant number of our referrals for what we call ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, right? NCMEC reports that between 2019 and 2020, the number of online enticement reports increased by 97%. Okay, so from 2019 to 2020, it went up 97%. In the next 3 years, from 21 to 23, it's gone up 300%. This is important to us because these are just the reported cases. We have no idea how many unreported cases there are out there. The really disturbing part of these ICAC cases, the Internet Crimes Against Children, the ones that involve child sexual abuse material, the transmission of images, really sick and disturbing images that are being transmitted, shared, collected by these predators. One of the things that we know is that just over 50% of those CSAM cases involve actual conduct with a child, actual contact with a child. Okay, that is a tremendous number of our young people, our children, who are being victimized in a horrific way. And that's one of the reasons that these crimes against children are one of our top investigative priorities. Another of the ways that you have helped us is by funding child victim units. These are specialized units within our agency that target this type of criminal activity. As you might imagine, crimes against children, crimes involving children, are very different from your average crime. And it is a unique and especially talented investigator who wants to take that on a daily basis and wants to specialize in those kinds of investigations. That's what our CVUs do. Our first child victim unit was established in the northeast part of the state several years ago, and it was a pilot project. It was a cooperative effort between the KBI, the Attorney General's Office, Shawnee County Sheriff's Department, Topeka Police Department, and it sat in our headquarters building on Tyler Street, and it focused on crimes in the northeast part of the state. That was such a successful model that we have now replicated it in each of our other investigative regions. So at the KBI, we have 3 investigative regions. The entire western half of the state is what we call our west region, and then the eastern half is divided about in the middle for a northeast region and a southeast region, okay? The pilot project was in the northeast. It was very successful. In the 2024 session, you funded an additional child victim unit in the west region. We are just completing the staffing up of that, and last legislative session, you closed the loop and gave us the funding for a child victim unit in the southeast part of the state. So we now have coverage all across the state by investigators, especially devoted to investigating these particularly heinous crimes against children. So that's another thing, another aspect of what we do where we have asked for your help, you have responded, we're having tremendous success, and we're very, very grateful for your support.
Director, I just wanted to interject because this is an area that I'm very interested in. To what extent in investigating, I'll call these the CSAM cases, are you prosecuting people for just possession and or production, and what's the percentages of the investigations in terms of who you catch?
I don't know that off the top of my head, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I'll get an answer for you.
Thank you.
You bet. To pivot now away from crimes against children to crimes committed by juveniles. There we're seeing some fairly concerning numbers as well. I would refer you in particular to page 5 of the written testimony for the specific numbers. One of the things that I'll point out to you as being of particular note, in 2023, again, our most recent year for which data is available, there were 69 instances across the state of Kansas in which a 14-year-old used a handgun to commit a crime. A 14-year-old with a handgun, 69 of those in 2023, and 43 of them in which a 13-year-old used a handgun to commit a crime. So the numbers are up, but in addition to that, they're up in a way that is particularly concerning to us. Offender registration is another issue which is of great concern to us. And one of the things that I found when I took over as KBI director is we have a platform that we provide to the sheriffs. The sheriff of each county is responsible for offender registration, whether it's drug offenses, violent offenses, or most importantly, perhaps, sex offenses. It's the sheriff's obligation to track the court imposes a registration requirement, and then the sheriff has to track the registrations and the offenders. The platform that we at the KBI gave the sheriffs to use for tracking, in my view, is wholly inadequate. We have failed them. Some of the sheriffs have stepped up on their own and gone with an outside, a third-party vendor, if you will, because our product was inadequate. In my view, that's unacceptable. That's part of what we need to be doing to support these law enforcement agencies, is giving them a tool that they can use for such a critically important job. So in the last year, maybe just a little more than a year, I had a team at the KBI that we sent out across the state and across the country to look at how do other states do this, and what do we need to be doing differently, and what do we need to be doing better. And the answer after this year of study is we believe that there is a product out there, a third-party product, that we should implement on a statewide basis and make available to every sheriff's department in the state. So part of what we are requesting as a budget enhancement this year, and I got a text while I was in here that the governor did pick this up in the governor recommendations. We have requested $500,000 in funding. I don't know if we'll have to put it out for RFP or how exactly we'll go out at it, but we have identified a product or products out there that we think will provide these sheriffs with the tool that they need to adequately register and track these offenders. This is the kind of situation where you need to be able to know if a sex offender lives in your neighborhood, right? You need to be able to know if a violent offender or a drug offender moves in down the street from you. That's the kind of information that we're talking about having the ability to track. And these platforms that are available now that offer things that we have never offered with what we call the K-sort. And that is not just to track, but to use this registration as an investigative tool. So for example, if a woman calls in after a rape with just a couple of identifying features, right? Maybe a height, a race, a tattoo. You know, these software platforms will allow us to run that query and try to help identify that rapist, right? So this is a tool that in the past, some departments that have been able to afford it have stepped up and paid for it, but there's a lot of those departments across the state that haven't been able to do that. And from my perspective, we have an obligation to them, just like we do with the other departments. So that's something that we're going to be requesting going forward. The main issue that we have at the KBI right now, and the main thing I'm going to be asking the legislature for with help in the next session, is our headquarters. You may have heard that I've given some testimony in the off session to a couple of different committees about the status of our headquarters building. We are housed in a building that's absolutely beautiful. But it was constructed well before the KBI was even created, and it was originally a middle school. And in the process of trying to figure out how to deal with this, do we try to upgrade it? Do we try to rehab it? What do we do with it? How do we get the effective, efficient space that we need to do our job? One of the things we came across was an appraisal of the building that was done in 1996. And in 1996, it was referred to as structurally obsolete. Almost 30 years ago, the building was structurally obsolete, and that's what we're finding. And I could talk with you about crumbling concrete and decaying pipes and the risks that we face every day by putting records in this building, by housing electronics in this inadequate space. You know, we are the criminal justice repository for the state of Kansas, and the facility that we have to maintain those records just isn't up to modern standards. But the main things that I would ask you to consider is that the building isn't safe. And it's not safe in two ways. First of all, it was constructed well before the invention of fire suppression systems, and we have filled it in such a way that we now have human beings working in spaces that were never intended for human occupancy. They were intended as file storage. And it's primarily wooden construction, and there's no fire suppression in there. And that worries me a great deal. I don't feel like our folks are safe in there. And in addition to that, we're not safe because of the location. We don't have a physical perimeter. We're not inside a fence. We are located in a place where, unfortunately, and I drew a little, I drew the ire of some folks for characterizing our neighborhood as being a horrible neighborhood. But we ran the crime data, and for last year, within a 2-block radius of our headquarters, there were more than 51 crimes reported to the Topeka Police Department, ranging from vandalism and vehicle theft to aggravated robbery and aggravated burglary, within 2 blocks of our headquarters within a year. Now, the thing that you need to understand about our building is it's not just a building where agents go in and out of and go to work. The folks that I'm worried about the lack of effective physical safety aren't our agent population. The majority of the people that work in that building are administrative support folks, they're record folks. For example, we have a new mom in the building, and under our maternity policy, Cassidy gets to bring Benjamin to work every Thursday and Friday for the next 6 months. And I'm delighted with that, right? I think it's a wonderful thing for her, for the baby, and for our organization. But it's not safe to have her parking in unprotected parking and walking in and out of the building with that baby. And that's the problem that we're faced by virtue of our location and the lack of an effective physical perimeter. If you look at law enforcement buildings across the country, it's an unfortunate fact that they are increasingly secure buildings because of the threat posed against law enforcement organizations, right? And then we have the fact that it's located in an area where we have an incredible homeless population, we have a lot of criminal activity, we have folks working around the clock in this building, coming in and out in a very unsafe environment. And I feel as though I am failing our employees at my most essential function of providing them with a safe place to work. So that is the main driving factor behind our request. And I know that when the numbers look like they look, this is a heavy lift. I understand that, but this is also a very grave need. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll let you focus me with questions if you like. I'll be happy to stand for questions. I'll be happy to yield some time back to my longtime friend if you have questions for him.
Thank you. We are over time, but I think I will give us about 10 more minutes to for the committee to ask any questions that they might of either conferee.
Your permission, Mr. Chair, when you mentioned that we're over time, could I make note of the fact that I took half as much time as Mr. Schultz?
No, that will not be noted.
Could we, I would.
No, please. Yeah. So, yeah. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a lot of questions, which I can't ask today, but I hope you will come back, both of you. But would you speak just a little bit? You guys are, I'm from Pittsburgh. You're building a tremendous facility in Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh State. And could you just talk about that for a little bit? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Representative. I'm so excited about that. When I came into this job, in my conversations with my predecessor, He told me that one of the most difficult problems that he had and that he hadn't been able to solve was what to do with our location in Pittsburgh. We were operating out of a building that we rented right on Main Street in Pittsburgh that we'd been in for about 25 years. The building had reached the point where the HVAC wasn't working and couldn't be repaired, and on most summer afternoons, we couldn't keep the temperature in the building under 80 degrees. We have very sophisticated scientific instruments in the laboratory part of that building. We had water leaking through the roof onto some of that equipment. And Kirk told me that he hadn't been able to find another location to put us into, and he didn't want to move the office and move those people out of Pittsburgh. And so when I started, I looked at the KBI and I saw, one of the things I saw was the tremendous success that we'd had partnering with Washburn University with regard to our Forensic Science Center. So if any of you haven't yet been to the KBI Forensic Science Center on the campus at Washburn, I would invite you to come for a tour. It's our newest facility. It is a state-of-the-art, 100,000 square foot scientific laboratory from which we provide forensic science services to law enforcement organizations all across the state. That has been a tremendous partnership to have us on the academic campus, but then in addition, there is classroom space in the building, so we get students coming in and out of the non-secure side of the building. Our scientists participate as adjunct faculty members in the science department at the university, and then we have students who intern for us in the building, and it's a wonderful collaboration. So seeing that success that was attributable to Attorney General Schmidt and Director Thompson, they did all this. I went down to Pittsburgh and I met with President Shipp. And it was kind of an entertaining meeting because I walked in, I put together a PowerPoint and about a dozen slides and walked in ready to make a pitch to him to partner with us on a similar project. And when I sat down with them and we were done introducing ourselves, I said, hey, are you familiar with the partnership that we have with Washburn University and our Forensic Science Center? And his response was, yes, would you do that here? And I said, wait a minute, I got 30 minutes of material and 12 slides I got to show you. But he was excited about the opportunity. And what we have found is there is another opportunity there for collaboration between law enforcement and academia. And there was such a vacuum in that part of the state when it came to law enforcement resources that as soon as we began communicating this idea among law enforcement communities in Southeast Kansas, we had partners coming to the table. So the building that's planned down there that we hope to break ground on soon, the land was provided by the university. It will be right on the southeastern edge of the campus. It will be the Southeast Regional Office for the KBI. It will also be the 24/7 headquarters for the Pittsburgh State University Police Department. The Highway Patrol will have a zone commander in there. The AG's office will have office space for prosecutors on a drug task force. The FBI will have desk space for when their agents are in the area doing investigation, as will the U.S. Marshal Service have desk space. And there will be an academic footprint with classrooms. There will be a training room for law enforcement. We're talking with the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center about partnering with them so they can offer training in that facility. And we'll have, for the first time in that part of the state, we hope to also include a 5-lane firing range for law enforcement to use when training for training on their weapons. So we're very excited about the collaboration. We think that is a building that's going to make a generational impact on your part of the state, sir.
We're excited also.
Great. Thank you very much.
We'll take one more from Representative Barrett, and I really think both conferees very interesting, and it may be that we'll ask you to come back because we probably have more questions than we're able to ask today. Thank you so much.
Happy to do so, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my question will actually be for Mr. Schultz, if he's able to come up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. It was a lot of good, really great information. I guess my question would be on the history. So on that grid, it's based off of convictions, correct? So, you know, if you've worked around a prosecutor's office, I work on the investigation side for a prosecutor's office. We realize that, you know, over 90% of cases are pled down, right, for more serious offenses.
Yes.
Can you talk about how many of those people, if you have any data that really reflects those who went to prison based on that history grid were actually pled down convictions versus what they were originally charged with?
Well, and that's a great question. That is, as you know, that is the nature of the beast. And the individuals that are charged sometimes are in 90+% of the time, there's some type of agreement between the prosecutor and the defendant to resolve the case without the need for a bench or jury trial. And so that is, you know, we are actually on the cusp of actually doing something of what you're talking about. We've recently actually been getting OJA data that actually goes clear back to arrest. We have the arrest piece, but the charging piece we have not had. OJA has that, and we can actually now potentially follow that individual from arrest all the way through when they're actually released from parole or post-release supervision. So we actually, it's a work in progress, but what you're actually asking is going to be something that is doable to determine. You know, and as I said, you're looking at a situation where that actually happens a lot. You know, and keep in mind, and I'm being Captain Obvious here, but law enforcement has their ideas of what should be charged. Prosecutors have their idea as to what should be charged. And then at the end of the rainbow, the justice rainbow, we have a sentence that actually hopefully everybody can, you know, most of the time live with. So that's the main process, but I understand what you're saying in terms of saying, you know, you have an aggravated battery that's pled down, an ag assault that's pled down. You have something else that, you know, that this is the crime that you started with, and for various reasons, factual or otherwise, you know, victim availability, whatever else, you may have to actually come to an agreement to resolve it at a different way than what it was originally charged. So yes, we're working on that, and thanks for the question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you both again very, very much. We will adjourn for the afternoon.